Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Jesus and John from the VIA team. Gentlemen, thanks for being here with me.
Thank you
Pleasure.
for having us, Chris.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you both. We'll be diving into everything, PQC, post-quantum cryptography, with a kind of a engineering focus on that. And I was telling you off air before we went live, this is one of those topics I often hear folks talk about, but you don't get to meet a lot of people who are doing this in practice. That's what's going to make the conversation unique. And I think it's something that's becoming more and more relevant for practitioners in the community. But first, before we go, diving into particulars, I'd like to learn more about each of you, maybe starting with you, Jesus.
So, Jesus Cárdenas, SVP Product Architect at VIA, have been with VIA 8 years. So it has been quite a journey into the cybersecurity world, very interesting. And then in the past 8 years, really working on how to analyze data in isolated environments and zero trust. So in that case, through that work, that is how we started developing PQ-resistant solutions for the Department of Defense. And John, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is John Suremba. I'm a software engineer at VIA and a key contributor of our quantum transfer application, Qt for short. And it's designed to make data transfer end-to-end quantum resistant. My work has involved tackling the challenge of integrating post-quantum cryptography with zero trust architecture, leveraging Web3 technologies like blockchain, all to work together for data decentralization and integrity. So I'm coming on as someone who's taken what are often more theoretical concepts and built tangible production software with them to help protect people from the security threats that quantum computers pose.
I think that's what has me excited about the conversation. You kind of laid it out there perfectly. It's like, this is often a theoretical concept, thinking something we read about or speculate about in the future, not something we get to meet a lot of people who are doing this in practice now, as I talked about in the beginning there. So like my initial conversation, or question to you guys is like, why should organizations care about PQC now? And people like, it's going to be a threat in 2030 or, things like that. But of course there's, real world risks too, like harvest now, decrypt later, things of that nature. How do you kind of speak to, customers and clients and partners when it comes to like, getting people to kind of understand the risk that presents to us right now? And feel free, either one of you guys can jump in first.
That is a great question. And as you mentioned, like the problem with post-quantum security is if you wait for post-quantum cryptography to be here to be able to break the algorithms, you're already years late. So that harvest now, decrypt later is a real thing. But not only that, if you are in the defense industrial base, you have the Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite guidelines that they have already been released with the latest algorithms. And in that case, they are already recommended to be implemented starting by the end of 2025, and they will be, and everybody will have to adhere to them by 2027. So actually, right now is the perfect window to start getting on them.
Anything to add on that, John? Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. I mean, quantum computers, the mere potential for them poses an existential threat that breaks internet security as we know it. You think of regular internet browsing, even with a VPN, online banking, shopping, sending and receiving emails. These are all things that the possibility of quantum computers pose a threat to breaking and becoming insecure. And there's already working proof of concepts of small quantum computers. It's not just an idea, it's a real thing. And my understanding is it's more of a question of scale at this point. So many experts believe that, even though there's a lot of, it can be a question of like, how much is hype? When is it going to be? What's for certain? So I think the clarity comes from the fact that most experts believe that it is a matter of when rather than if. And because it poses such a fundamental threat to the way that we do security, it's important to be proactive and tackle it now.
Yeah, it makes sense to me as someone who's been a practitioner my whole adult career in cyber. Anyone knows that, big initiatives like these that we're talking about when it comes to cryptography and encryption and things of that nature take time, initiative, funding, resources. And I feel like if we just wait till the time comes, you're going to be kind of, but you're going to be in a bad position, basically. So it makes sense to start now, be thinking ahead, be proactive, because the technology, as you said, it is evolving quite quickly and it is coming. And on that front, there's been groups working on this, like NIST, for example. They've had several, PQC standards that they've published. And I was curious, should we have confidence in the NIST PQC standards? And, what's VIA's perspective in terms of like implementation on these? Again, something a lot of folks read about or have heard of, but they haven't really seen much in implementation. So I'd be curious to hear from you both on that. Maybe start with you on that one, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a step back, I feel like it was a humbling experience in my own engineering journey to learn about NIST, which stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. I feel like they're kind of unsung heroes, kind of like open source maintainers in a way, hold the internet together. I was really humbled to learn that, if you're using the internet today, you are in a sense trusting the NIST standards because there's so much that is using them. When they published the Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, back in 2001, it's been over 2 decades. And in terms of a track record, we're still using it today. AES has not been cracked. It's something that's reliable. So that's like one thing that's a confidence builder, is we already have been using their standards. They work very well. There's no reason to think that we can't continue to trust the amazing work they do. But then in terms of, so moving on from traditional and moving toward post-quantum standards, this was not this private or mysterious or secret endeavor. NIST held a global competition. It was a public effort, international, bringing together the best minds in the field in order to come up with these new algorithms. Underwent like 8 years of scrutiny, and you can look up all the publishings and the results. And so the fact that it's been this open, collaborative process, bringing together the best minds in the field, I think is another reason that we can have confidence.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jesus. I'm curious to hear from you, but on that note, NIST does all kinds of amazing work. Just not only encryption and PQC type standards and things like that, but the cybersecurity framework, risk management framework, CMMC. Like the list goes on and on in terms of the work they do. They're involved in efforts tied to the National Vulnerability Database. When that went down earlier this year, everyone took note. For example, so their impact on the community is truly outstanding. But anything to add on that, Jesus, in terms of how it can be implemented, and also why people should trust the PQC standards coming out of NIST?
I think John had a great explanation there, and he covered it very well. Just the ability to have this open public process where everybody can submit questions and try to validate what is really happening in the industry. That is also helping the trust of the ecosystem, and it's also breaking this black box idea. Like nobody really wants black box cryptography or black box security, so they make it very open, very public. It's really a foundational point from all of the certifications and all of the work is done in cryptography. But something that is important to understand is needs focus a lot on the algorithm side, how to have the security on the algorithm. It doesn't focus on the implementation. So that there is something that is a NIST standard, it doesn't mean that it's ready to be implemented or the implementations are secure. So that is an important distinction as people go on their post-quantum journey, or any of the NIST standard. Is there is a big difference between the theoretical part and the maturity of the industry from an implementation point of view.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of feels like NIST gives, folks the tools and like kind of a high level framework and standards to lean into and use, but they're not very prescriptive in implementation guidance or providing you products that help facilitate that, things of that nature. And to your guys, the opening comments here, you're actually doing this in the real world. I'd be curious to hear, some perspectives or experiences, lessons learned, that kind of thing of real world applications of PQC, whether it's, certain industries or organizations, things of that nature. So maybe start with you on that one, Jesus.
Sure. So to discussion we're having, like you have the NIST standards, Then those NIST standards are converted into CNSA guidelines that then the industry must follow. And again, those standards apply depending of the certification you may be tackling or the industry you are in a different way. But then not only you have to follow those standards, but then you start moving into FIS validation. So we're talking at the beginning on theoretical implementation. What are the algorithms that are resilient? Then you start moving into the implementation side, where you have the cryptography model validation program that will attest for the quality of those implementations. So in this case, for anyone that is looking into CMMC, anyone that is looking into CGs, anyone that is moving into national security systems, they are going to have to comply with the latest guidelines. And not only there is the process that you have to go through to make sure your algorithm is secure, how you are implementing it, and the environment where you are, and the hardware where you are running it, but also where does it apply. So if you are working with any financial data, PII, social security numbers, if you are a manufacturer where you want to protect your latest electronics designs, or you are a submarine or CBM that you are trying to build one of these, that they take a lot of companies to build like these systems. So it's when you have to rely on all of these in the real world certifications and processes.
Yeah, I think we're going to see, regulated industries, industries with sensitive data, whether it's national security, financial industries, things like that, healthcare data, things, things of that nature are definitely going to be the industries that are, I think, going to have to be forced or, nudged along with regulation and compliance requirements to kind of make these changes first. One term I've heard thrown around a lot when it comes to PQC is the phrase of cryptographic agility, right? The ability to, move quickly between one algorithm and another, whether it's current to future state PQC standards, or in the future as, the technology evolves, migrating between different PQC standards. Why is that, cryptographic agility, why is that phrase so important? And, how practical is it as well? John, I'd be curious to hear from you on that.
Yeah, sure. In terms of being able to be flexible, cryptographic agility, I think it's important. I mean, in terms of from an engineering perspective, the libraries that we've built out, the applications of using these algorithms, we've tried to be intentional with making sure that we're not making things too interdependent or assuming that we're using one algorithm. So, simple best practices in terms of using environment variables, making it so that you can take out one algorithm, plug in a new one, and it still works. So I would say a lot of the same best practices in terms of making sure that you don't have the libraries and the applications that you're building to be too deeply coupled or linked to the exact algorithm that you're using, but to make it adaptable with the way that you build them out.
Anything to add on that, Jesus? I know you guys are building, particular products in this space. So, curious to hear from like an engineering perspective, how can people go about decoupling or, making things less dependent from an architectural implementation standpoint?
That is a great question. And to the thoughts around crypto agility, the reason why it's important is every time you have to touch cryptography in your code, the development cycles are long, because you have to be thoughtful about the changes. You have to make sure you are using the libraries in the right way. And another important part of the crypto agility is you never know when there could be a 0-day vulnerability. And actually right now we are moving more towards systems that are continuously scanned for vulnerabilities. And you have any AI agent that you could plug into a code base and review and try to track for any vulnerability or exploit a system. So that crypto agility, that ability to be able to patch quickly, and that is what is critical at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of headlines now showing AI, researchers using ALMs or AI to produce exploits for CVEs in 15 minutes for trivial amounts of money. Last week, of course, Anthropic kind of rattled the whole industry when they shared this cyber espionage report showing multi-agent use cases of attackers using that in the real world, things like that. When it comes to people thinking about PQC migration, for example, what are some key considerations and steps? Like, what's the essential knowledge that developers implementing the algorithms need to keep in mind, or things that people should be thinking of as they move forward here?
So an important consideration there is in which hardware are you going to run your PQ implementation? And the reason is, again, if you are just trying to get one open source library and using it, that is fine, it's a good starting point. But if you are trying to look for a certification, if you are trying to be CMMC compliant, for example, or FIS validated, the reality is like it's not only the algorithm side or the implementation, but also the hardware, and also that hardware at what speed is changing and adapting to it. Like, for example, if we are talking about cloud server instances, the cycle of innovation there from companies like AWS is quite fast. Now, if we are talking commercial mobile phones, the reality is like even if Apple is releasing a new iOS phone today with post-quantum resistance, that iOS phone is not going to be in every household. That will take years for it to be spread across the industry. So something that we have been really thinking at VIA with our VIA wallet, for example, is not just thinking about post-quantum cryptography, but having a post-quantum hybrid approach. So in this case, we are using classic compliant certifying the hardware cryptography, while at the same time you can rely on a post-quantum future cryptography that will arrive into your hardware. So really you have to be mindful about what is the platform that you are targeting and what is the release cycle for the FIS validation to go into your target platform.
Makes sense. And now, like, when I look at this space, I kind of joked in the beginning that it's a niche industry within cybersecurity. Many haven't went down this path yet. But VIA is, of course, not the only vendor and the only provider in this space, looking to make an impact and kind of drive the future when it comes to PQC. What do you guys feel makes VIA's approach so unique or differentiates you from some of those in the space? On this one, I'd be curious to hear from both of you, both from the, kind of the founder's perspective, the practitioner's perspective, as you go out there and, get a sense of the landscape and the customers and things like that. John, if you want to jump in at first, go ahead.
Sure, happy to. I think one of the things that makes us unique is our experience with our clients, like working closely with the DoD and following the high security standards in terms of real world use cases, air-gapped environments, assuming from the ground up that the network that we're working with is compromised and open. Like one of the greatest vulnerabilities that quantum computers expose is on our networks, breaks TLS and whatnot, breaks HTTPS. And so VIA's approach assumes an open and insecure network as a starting point and makes it irrelevant thanks to our hybrid implementation that Jesus spoke to.
How about you, Jesus? Feel free to kind of, shamefully, plug in there. What makes you all unique, and kind of how are you looking to differentiate yourself from some of the others in the field?
Awesome question. As you pointed to, I think VIA in this case was very active to integrate their clients' feedback, in this case, defense, and when they were giving us these guidelines, how they were applying to us, they were applying to our product, like the VIA wallet, as I mentioned, where we have always applied this post-quantum hybrid approach to make sure that even if you are not using the latest hardware phone, we are not leaving you on the side in an insecure system, but we are really trying to move our clients along this process so that it doesn't feel like, oh, now full suite systems, ask all your users to go and change phones or change devices. We have really tried to grow with the industry and it's evolving it. But not only that, like I think from a VIA point of view, we have also been tackling data security, how to protect the data and transfer, and we have like real world applications today of post-quantum cryptography, where anyone could go today to qt.solvewithvia.com and they can start transferring files in a secure way, or even starting workflows in the system.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, especially for those not looking, or not sure how to navigate this space and understand the nuances of making that migration and being prepared for this transition. Having a product or a platform that's kind of purpose built to help facilitate that is going to be key. And then one other thing I wanted to ask you all before we kind of wrap up here is, this is again a very novel topic in the space. Many are still learning. There is some great papers out there. For example, Cloud Security Alliance recently had a PQC for practitioners paper come out that I had checked out about a month ago or so. But I know you also have the VIA Knowledge Hub that you guys have recently started, and there's some great resources on there. What is that Knowledge Hub? What can people keep an eye out for there? What are you hoping to kind of contribute to the community with that? Either of you guys feel free to weigh in there.
So I can provide a quick intro. So in this case, VIA Knowledge Hub is an opportunity for industry thought leaders to share their knowledge. I think it's very hard to sell and be part of the defense industrial base. There are a lot of learnings from a contractual point of view, from a certification point of view, from a environment where you deploy point of view. It took us really years to get that knowledge. We went over this path the hard way, or we're like bumping across each challenge. And I think with VIA Knowledge Hub, we have an opportunity to unite all of the learnings we have gotten over the years and also see other perspectives, to be able to grow as a community and also to be able to grow our products to fit these needs.
Yeah, I know I found some interesting resources there, and I'll be keeping an eye out for more as you guys continue to build out that kind of curated content for the community. So I'll be sharing a link to that in the show notes for folks that want to check out that Knowledge Hub. And again, you can check out VIA at solvewithvia.com. I'll keep a link to that in the show notes as well. And John, Jesus, thanks so much for jumping on here and chatting all things PQC, kind of why we should care now, where we're going, and the standards that are relevant, some of the industries that will be impacted, earliest in terms of defense, healthcare, financial services, things like that. And appreciate you all sharing your real world perspectives on a topic I think doesn't get discussed enough. So thank you guys.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care.